everyone, and thank you for joining us here at foreclosure.com, our weekly webinar series. Welcome, Jim.
Hello. Thank you for having me, Linda.
Oh, we're excited to have you join us and coming back to us actually today. Thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your busy day to spend a little bit of time learning about how to profit with the lease option secret. And Jim definitely knows all about lease options, backwards and frontwards, and we're excited to turn some time over to him in just a few minutes about that. Just a few housekeeping things for you. First off, for those of you that don't know or haven't been with us before, thank you very much for joining us and spending your time with us. My name is Linda Yates. I'm the Director of Education here at foreclosure.com, and I'll be the moderator for this session. And as we go through this session, if there are certain things that come to mind, certain questions that you have for Jim as he presents, in your panel that you logged on to for this webinar, there's an area for you to post questions. We would encourage you to post those questions as they come to mind, as we will leave time towards the end of the webinar to pose as many possible questions as we can to Jim. Also, a reminder that at the close of business tomorrow, you will receive an email from us with the recording of this webinar. So just a reminder that will be available to you. So if you missed something during some point of the webinar, it's like, oh man, what was that point again? I want to catch that. That's going to come to your email inbox at the close of business tomorrow. And then lastly, but definitely not least, as you exit the webinar today, there will be a survey that we would ask you to complete, as we care very much for your feedback, like to hear what we do well and what we can improve upon. All right, I'd like to just formally introduce Mr. James Gage today. He is our panelist. He happens to be a real estate mentor and an active investor. And why we put emphasis on that active investor is this isn't a gentleman that's just done a few properties and then is just talking about it. He is in the trenches doing it and has been doing it for over 20 years. He also happens to have been, have been, an arbitrator for the U.S. Congressman for over 15 years. He's also an attorney, is that right?
Yes, I went to law school, but I never ended up practicing. I became an arbitrator instead.
Okay. And then a licensed real estate agent. So he's got a lot of experience, life experience, as well as experience in real estate investing. Okay, before I turn it over to him, I just want to remind everyone a couple different webinars we have coming around the corner. Next couple of weeks, we're going to have Sharon Restrepo here talking about building that short sale package that you actually give to the bank. This is the third part of a three-part series that we've done with Sharon. If you missed part 1 or part 2, we do have those available on our on-demand webinar, so go check that out. And then in a couple weeks, towards the end of the month, we're going to have Andy Hiller here. Actually, that should be the 17th. That's going to be on the 17th of June. He's going to be chatting with us about investing in this cool market right now and how you can make some great deals and what to be watching out for and looking for. Alrighty, Jim, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you. So we'll do the handoff here. You ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, well, so everyone's going to see a slight flicker here while he takes that over.
Yes, they will. And I'm just waiting for it to come through because technology is great as long as it works.
Yeah.
When it works, I should say. But here we go. Okay, I got the screen. Okay, you should be seeing my screen.
Yep, there we are.
Okay, great. Well, hello all. This is James Gage, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to spend a few minutes, hours with myself and Linda, and hopefully we're going to go through a lot of good information here. I am committed to giving you the most information that I can in the time allotted. And this is information that I am currently using in my investing. I invest in 3 different areas right now due to the cycle of the market that we're in. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. But I invest in lease options, of course, the subject that we'll be talking about in detail today. I also invest in short sales, and I also invest in probates. Okay? And I think these are the areas that we have to really, as real estate investors, take a serious look at. And I'm trying to click to the next page, and for whatever reason, I don't have control here.
Okay, I see your mouse moving there.
Okay, you see my mouse moving?
Mhm.
Okay, so that's a good thing. Okay. For some reason, pardon me, ladies and gentlemen here. There we go. All right, we're moving here. Okay.
Okay, great.
But before we get started, I think I need to give you a little bit of my background because I think it's important. There's so many, roads to travel out there right now. So many people out there saying, "Hey, I have the answer here to all your investing woes," and I'm the be-all to be-all. And there are a lot of gurus out there. And as Linda had articulated earlier, I'm an active investor. I think that's what separates me from most of the people out there. Again, I don't throw stones at anybody because I don't want stones thrown at me. But I think if you're going to teach somebody how to do something, you have to actively be involved in it, because this industry, just like so many industries, are changing on a regular basis. The nuances and the logistics are constantly changing. The laws are changing. Take, for instance, before this webinar started, I was talking with Linda, and she said, "Are there any states that you cannot do lease options in it?" I said, "Presently, no. There are some states that have become restrictive, and you have to do them a certain way. And those states are like Texas and Maryland right now, and some portions of North Carolina. But to say that there's a blanket law that says you absolutely can't do lease options, well, there's none out there." And, that's one of the things we're going to talk about today is who should you believe and what should you believe, and how can you go disseminate through the information and find out what the gospel truth is, so to speak. But some of my credentials include I have an accounting and legal degree, as I had said at the beginning, or actually Linda had posed the question to me. My minor is in accounting, and I do have a Juris Doctorate. And I also was in the medical profession for a number of years. I'm a federal and state arbitrator for over 16 years. I decided I didn't want to sue people for a living, so I became an arbitrator to hopefully help people and to settle problem disputes and litigations outside the courtroom step. Federal and state negotiator, not only with the IRS, but also with the Department of Revenue. That's the state taxing agencies. But the big thing, my claim to fame, was I was an arbitrator for a U.S. congressman and their family. And the reason why I can talk about it without breaking any privacy issues is because it was all over the newspapers here in the Northeast. I represented former Congressman Peter Bluten's family in what's called up here the Foxwoods Casino debacle. In Connecticut, we have two casinos, Foxwoods, and we have also Mohegan Sun. And there was a little problem down there as far as gambling debt, and I was able to go in there and negotiate it. So a lot of people come up to me and they'll say, "Well, why would they engage your service as an arbitrator rather than going to a high-priced lawyer?" And again, I knew from law school that some of the worst negotiators, unfortunately, are attorneys, because we're taught how to litigate and how to attach people's bank accounts and put attachments on real estate. So we're taught to litigate, not to negotiate. So when people heard about my negotiating abilities and so forth, which, by the way, it actually began in real estate when I started investing in real estate some 20-some-odd years ago. They gravitated over to me, and there it began, so to speak. Next thing, a licensed real estate agent. Okay, the good thing about this is anybody that's on the line here that's not a real estate agent, I highly encourage that people get their real estate license, for the simple fact that if you're going to be in the industry of investing in real estate, you're going to want to know everything about that industry. So why not become a real estate agent? And I always tell people there's a big advantage that real estate agents have over everybody else. And what is that? MLS. They have access to MLS. MLS, if you use it correctly, is a gold mine. Expired listings, for instance. I mean, where else can you get expired listings unless you're a realtor, or you have a good friend that's a realtor, or you have a family member or whatever, and after time they're going to be sick of giving you a bunch of leads and not getting anything in return for it. And I'm not talking about giving them a gift certificate to Applebee's or anything. I'm talking about substantial income, because they are professionals and they need to get paid. So I tell people, go ahead and take the course. Go ahead and learn about the real estate industry. As far as being an agent, what's the worst that could happen? Maybe once in a while you sell a house, you hang your license in a broker's office, and you get access to that most important thing, the real estate MLS. That way you can pull your own comparables, you can go ahead and target market to expired listings and so forth. And so I highly encourage that you do that. I'm also a financial estate planner. I was certified at one time, but just because now I do real estate investing and mentoring, one-on-one mentoring on a full-time basis, I've kind of dropped that. I was a PA, a physician assistant in the Air Force. I told you that's where the medical background comes in. And, for a hobby, what do I do? Well, I love to fish, and you'll see that in a little bit. But also I hold a paramedic license because I'm an adrenaline junkie. I like that fast-paced stuff, so I still hold a paramedic license. But the most important thing here, we forget about all the stuff we just talked about. The most important thing is I've been an active investor for over 20 years. And that's really where the rubber meets the road, because especially what we're experiencing now in this real estate cycle, I've been around the block a few times, so I've seen this kind of cycle in the late 80s, early 90s. Granted, not to this particular extent, but we did have a rash of foreclosures in 1989 and 1990. Everything goes with cycles and patterns and trends, and unfortunately we're in a bad cycle right now, and hopefully within the next couple of years we'll be able to pull out of it. And we're going to talk about that, about all the information that's out there right now. What should you believe? What should you not believe? Is it a good time to buy? Is it a good time to, put this strategy on the table or take that one off the table? So that's a little bit about my background. I hope you found that interesting and hopefully informative, and you can see a little bit where I'm coming from. But I always like to start off my webinars by giving you a little bit of what I call real estate wisdom. Over the 20-plus years that I've been in investing, I like to kind of impart to the people that hear me. I speak at a lot of real estate clubs across the United States, and I always like to start off with some wisdom, and hopefully you'll be able to use this and not fall into some of the traps out there. And the first one is every adversity carries it with a seed of an equal or greater benefit. Meaning that you're going to run into a lot of stone walls, or brick walls, I should say. The whole thing within real estate investing, whether it's lease options, short sales, flipping, whatever the case may be, is consistency. A lot of us will go to the seminars and we'll go to the Maui Wowie boot camps, for 3 days, and we'll get all pumped up and everything, and we'll go back to our homes and we'll be supercharged, and we'll do real estate for 80 hours a week for a couple of weeks, and then that thing we call life creeps in. And now it's soccer season or baseball season, or we're getting ready to go into the holidays, or whatever the case may be, graduations now, summer vacations, and we forget all about the real estate and we put it on the back burner. And then we scratch our head and wonder why we're not successful, because it's all about consistency. But you're going to run into those stone walls, you're going to run into those brick walls, and the whole thing is that, when you fall down, it doesn't really matter how many times you fall down, it's how many times you get back up. Okay, and I know you probably say, well, that's easy for you to say, Jim. You've been doing it for 20 years. You're probably making a great income, and I'm just a novice, or I'm, only been in it for a year, and I'm not really seeing much progress. But you learn from those times where you fail. You're not going to be successful unless you fail, and I know that most people don't want to hear that, but it's the gospel truth. That's what happens, is you got to fail to succeed sometimes. So just look at adversity as, hey, it's a learning opportunity. I'll put it in the back of my mind. I'll never repeat the same mistake twice, and then I'll go on with the program. Don't do anything that causes you to quit. It's amazing to me that the people that love us the most are usually the people that pull us down the most, as far as, when you get into either if you have an entrepreneurial spirit or if you're investing in real estate. They'll tell you, oh, you can't do that. Well, that sounds illegal. You're going to go to jail, or whatever the case may be. So don't do anything that causes you to quit. Yeah, will it be those days that you feel like you're walking through the desert, it's 120 degrees, there's no water in sight and so forth? Yeah, but you got to press on, because, again, real estate, if anybody tells you real estate investing is easy, run away. It's like that Lost in Space robot, Danger Will Robinson. You want to run far away, okay? Because real estate investing is hard work, but it's better than any job that I know of or had. And that's where it comes down to. Return on investment, ROI. If you really crunch the numbers, you're leveraged, and you work smart, you're going to see that you're going to make a tremendous amount of money on the amount of time you're able to put in. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is about the lease option secret and the lease option system. and you have to have a system. But getting back to this, don't do anything that causes you to quit. The next one, the quality of your preparation determines the quality of your performance. A lot of people, the reason why they go out and they fail is they don't do their investigatory work. They never prepare. They go off with what I call the shotgun blast mentality. They go ahead and pull the trigger and they hope they hit something. And you don't want to ever employ that kind of a strategy. You want to do your homework. You want to do your investigatory work. Even though the big terms out there in real estate right now are location, 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 and it's probably been that since the dawn of time, I don't necessarily agree with that, because there are good deals in every locale of wherever geographical area you reside. It's just you have to do your prep work. You have to do your comparables. You have to know the location, what's the market value, or if you're going to employ the landlord mentality is, hey, what am I going to be able to get for rents here? I got to crunch my numbers. Does this deal make sense? Does it not make sense? In the case of foreclosures and everything, before I sit down at a table with somebody in foreclosure, I jump on the registry of deeds and I look to see if there's any encumbrances against the property. Are there any municipal liens? Are there any IRS liens? Are there any mechanic liens? That way I can get a feel of what I'm dealing with before I actually hopefully sit down with the homeowner. So you need to go ahead and prepare yourself. And the other big thing is know your exit before you go in the entrance. Don't take on a property and then try to figure out what you're going to do with it. What you want to do is you want to know before you even take on the responsibility or sign on the dotted line for a property, you know exactly what you're going to do with that property. I'm going to go ahead and flip this property. I'm going to go ahead and assign this property. I'm going to hold it and rent it out. Whatever the case may be, I'm going to do a rehab. Whatever the case may be, you need to know what you're going to do with that property before you sign on the dotted line. Okay, continuing with our theme. When you're on top of the mountain, others will try to push you off. When everything is going right in your life, expect somebody to come and try to topple you over. And that's true in real estate. I look back at my life in the past 20-plus years of investing in real estate, and when everything is going smooth and everything, I always keep in the back of my mind, hey, somebody's going to try to knock me off the top of this mountain. Either they're going to try to rain on my parade, or they're going to try to insinuate that I'm doing something that I'm not supposed to be doing, or whatever the case may be. But you have to know that when those things happen, you're on the right track somehow. Keep in the back of your mind that, hey, when I get all this adversity coming towards me, I got these people, barking at me, especially if you're a member of a RIA group. You've probably seen this happen to people before. You got the guy or the gal that comes in, and they got 3 or 4 deals that they're trying to get rid of underneath their arm and everything, and then the other investors, the jealousy comes in, and they're all looking at each other and say, well, that's probably a pit. Yeah, that should be in better homes and dumpsters. What gall this person has to go up there and try to get rid of this property. They try to push you off the mountain because they're jealous because you went out there and actually did something. So just keep that in mind. Never allow people to mistake your kindness for weakness. Okay? And if any of you that are on the call this afternoon are landlords, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The more you're nice to people, it seems the more they take advantage of you. That's why if you're in the real estate business, you have to treat it like a business. Again, that means that you don't disrespect people, but at the same time, you're not inviting them over to your house for Christmas parties and so forth. And the reason why I'm chuckling on that, I have a friend of mine that actually is a landlord, and he started off, and he's a nice guy and everything, and he actually did that. He started inviting tenants to his Christmas parties and everything. I said, you don't want to do that, because guess what? In January, they're all going to stiff you for your rent because they're going to think that you're their buddies now. And it was one of those prophecies that came true, so to speak. And he called me up and said, how did you know? I said, because I've been around the block. By the way, that's how I got involved in real estate. I got involved in the real estate back in 1985. I bought a bunch of courses. One of the guys that I bought course from was called Dave Delgado. Kind of dating myself here, but he was from Hawaii, and that was his big thing about getting a bunch of income property and living off of passive income. And I bought into all the positives, but I went into it kind of blind and didn't know all the negatives. And exactly that's what I did. I was trying to be the nice guy to people all the time, and when they said, "Oh, I don't have your rent," "Oh, don't worry about it, I'll get it in a couple of weeks," and so forth. And it almost pushed me into bankruptcy. So Again, never allow people to mistake your kindness for weakness. The key to your future is hidden in your daily activity. I call it the 5-minute rule, and this just builds upon what we were talking about earlier about consistency. You have to be consistent. One of the things is when people call my office and inquire about a mentoring program or actually sign on for a one-on-one mentoring program with me, the first thing I do within our first consultation, besides trying to set up a business plan on the direction they should be heading, is I want to know from them that no matter what happens in their life, hellfire and brimstone can come down from heaven, that they know that they can give X amount of minutes, X amount of hours to real estate every day. And I'm not talking about 7 days a week because everybody needs a sanity break. So let's say 6 days a week. You know, if they say 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever the case may be, we can work with that. But it has to be consistency. Consistency is the name of the game. I always use the analogy of the snowball coming down the hill because half the year I live in the Northeast. And the snowball comes down the hill, and as it comes down, it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, if that snowball were coming down the mountain and suddenly stopped, well, what's going to happen? It's going to become stagnant. It's going to start to, melt, and there's not going to be any forward progression. You know, it's like I use the another analogy of a glass of water that's sitting on a table. You got a glass of water that's sitting on the table, and you let it sit there for 3 or 4 days. What happens? Again, it becomes stagnant because there's no motion. There's no forward progress to it. So then bacteria starts growing, and then the water starts getting bacteria and algae and starts stinking. Well, you don't want your real estate investing career and business to stink because of lack of progress, lack of consistency. So whatever time that you're able to devote to real estate, the key to it is to go ahead and to make it on a regular basis. Continue putting in that 5 minutes, that 10 minutes, that 20 minutes, that hour, whatever you can, and you'll be successful. Obviously, you're not going to do 100 properties, in a year's time if you're only putting 20 minutes a day. But I think you can see where I'm going with this. The name of the game is consistency. Never have a take it or leave it attitude. This is the biggest mistake, one of the biggest mistakes, I should say, that investors do, is they have this mentality, especially when they're dealing with people that are in foreclosure. I mean, I've seen people at the table sitting down with homeowners, and, they'll give the ultimatum. Well, this is what I'm offering it. Take it or leave it. And a lot of these gurus teach that at that point, what you do is if there's no progress on the other side of the table, they're not saying, okay, I'll take it right off the bat. You're supposed to start getting up, putting your papers in your attaché case, and start walking towards the door. Well, that's fine if you're gonna mean it. But what most people do is they count to about 30 as they're walking towards the door. If they don't feel that the homeowner is bitten, so to speak, the bait, what they do is they'll turn around and say, well, maybe there's something else we can do here. Well, first of all, I've learned a long time ago as a negotiator, the thing that you've just lost is credibility with that party, because you're telling them this is the final, this is it. You better take it or leave it. There's no other offers coming, and then 30 seconds later you're saying, well, maybe there's something else we can do. You're burning your bridges. You might as well keep walking out the door because you just lost not only control of negotiating, but you just lost your credibility. So never have a take it or leave it attitude unless you mean it. And I've learned a long time ago that no today doesn't necessarily mean no tomorrow. And maybe somebody's not in a position right now where they can or would be able to do business with you, but I know from my experience, I've talked to people 6 months ago about doing a lease option or whatever on their property, and they've called me back and they said, you remember me? You gave me your business card. It was such and such property. Well, is that offer still available for that lease option thing? And I'll say, oh, absolutely. So never have a take it or leave it attitude. Okay, now let's talk, now that we went over that wisdom, hopefully that was of use to you, but let's talk about the economy. Some of you are probably saying, what the heck are we talking about the economy for in real estate wisdom? I'm here to learn about lease options. But I think that, they're connected here, especially I know for a fact the economy is an integral part of what's happening in the real estate market here. And 15 plus months ago, I was speaking at a real estate club down in Falls Church, Virginia. Fraser O'Leary is the founder of that particular club. And 15 months ago, I was telling people, hey, we're going to get ready for these tsunamis, financial tsunamis that are coming in. The first one's going to be the subprime market. And then we're going to have the credit market crunch, and then we're going to have this and that. And, they all looked at me like I had three heads, and they were laughing. And luckily, they were recording that night, so I got it on the recorder to at least vindicate myself and say, yeah, 15 months ago, I was telling you guys about this. Does that mean that I'm this great guru or swami or whatever the case may be? I have a big crystal ball or anything? No, the writing was just on the wall, and if you're able to perceive these trends and cycles, anybody could forecasted what I saw. So with that, let's talk about some of the things that are happening right now in our particular venue. Foreclosures are skyrocketing. Well, they've been that way for the last year or so. I know here in the Northeast, our foreclosures are up about 100% over last year. I think it's going to be another 24 to 36 months before we actually see a bottom. And there's some factors associated with that also. So by no means is it over. I know there are a lot of people out there that are, saying, hey, we're at a bottom, now's the time to buy. But, again, I wouldn't buy anything right now because I don't think we've seen a bottom yet. Again, foreclosures are up 100% compared to this time last year in most states. Unfortunately, a lot of the states that are getting hit hard now are California, Florida, Michigan. Here in the Northeast, we're seeing about a 20% decline in values. The stock market is up, but the dollar is weak. That's a big thing. Our dollar is being devalued on a daily basis. In 2002, the euro was at 88 cents against the dollar. Yesterday, it closed at $1.57 and some change. So, our dollar is being devalued before our eyes. And a lot of people, you'll hear the financial pundits say, well, that's good for our economy because that means we're able to sell our stuff over to the foreign countries. Well, last time I checked, we really don't make anything anymore. We've outsourced everything and become a service-oriented economy. So, really, why is that good? One of the first, a buddy of mine, since I'm up here in Northeast right now, I don't go down to Florida until January 1st. He sent me up a newspaper from my local area. I reside down in the Flagler County area of Florida, and they're starting to advertise real estate property and having conversion rates for the European and Asian investors that are coming over here buying things. Well, this is how much, pounds you'll have to bring to the table, or yen, or euros, or whatever the case may be. So it's really speaking a lot to what's happening, unfortunately, in our country. The stock market is up. Why is the stock market up? It's not because you and me, Joe Investor, is putting money into the market unless you're in a 401k or something that you don't have a choice from your job to be investing in. It's the foreign markets, again, the foreigners that are investing in our market because, again, their currency is so strong against ours right now. It's like a big flea market to them. So they're coming in and pumping it up. Again, the next 24 to 36 months, I see more foreclosures. Unfortunately, that's the trend that we're seeing because now what we're seeing is actually the prime loans starting to default because people are losing their jobs. And, again, I don't have to tell you about the next one. Oil and food are skyrocketing. Here in the Northeast, we, even though I'm not here in the winter months, we still heat our hot water by oil, and I had to have 100 gallons delivered last week, and it cost me $4.75 a gallon for heating oil. And I was talking to the guy, and he said in the wintertime it's probably going to be close to $9-10 a gallon for heating oil. So, all these things play a factor because, again, it's I think it's the debacle or the implosion of the middle class. So that being said, you're probably saying to me, wow, this is a lot of good news, Jim. Well, the good news is if you know what you're looking for, you know what you're doing, you can perceive these cycles and trends, you can make money. So how do you profit in this environment? Well, you become a master negotiator. So many courses and books and CDs and so forth and boot camps out there teach people the strategy of investing in real estate, whether that be lease options, short sales, probates, flipping, condo conversion, whatever the case may be. But they forget to include the other two prongs. I take an approach to real estate investing with a three-prong approach. Well, first of all, you got to learn about your technique or strategy. Okay, and that's where most gurus and books and tapes, they explain that to you in pretty good detail. The second thing, though, is how to negotiate. Negotiating is $1 million skill. We negotiate everything from the cradle to the grave. Okay, most people are bad negotiators. Either they're leaving too much money on the table, or they've negotiated a bad deal, or they've put out on the table, so to speak, a number to buy a property that should have never been put out on the table. I always tell people the first dimension price always loses. So you don't want to be out there because, again, you don't want to put your best offer out there, or you don't want to be on a fishing expedition by having to put a number on the table. Now, and the third thing is the marketing aspect. There are gurus out there that advocate that you can just go out there and find the property, and then you figure out how to put somebody in it or get rid of it. Well, to me, that seems ridiculous. It should be the opposite. You should find the people first, and then once you qualify them and put them in your database, then you go out and find the property to meet not only their needs, but to meet their budget. Okay? The next thing is become a leveraged investor. Once you're making money through real estate, you need to be leveraged. I invest in stock options, and I invest in the Forex market. Forex market is the foreign currency market. For every dollar I put in, I get $100 of leverage. I don't know where you get that kind of leverage anywhere else. So you have to diversify. Now's not the time to be buying mutual funds and stocks and so forth, because I think probably you're going to see a sharp decline in the stock market in the coming months. So that's not a time to be in. So I'd rather play options against it. Become a short-term investor with lease options, aka rent-to-own, which we're going to be talking about, short sales, foreclosure, REOs, and assignments. Okay? Why should you use lease options? And by the way, you can tell that I love fishing. That's me down in Flagler County with a redfish that I caught for all you anglers there. That's a huge redfish. So I thought I'd share a little bit of my hobbies with you. And again, the only reason why I have time to do that stuff is because I do lease options. I do all this forms of leveraged real estate. Why should you use lease options? Well, the biggest reason why we should be doing lease options now, and I didn't put it on the slide, is that people are having a hard time funding their deals, getting them financed, because the restriction in the underwriting has become very stringent. I was talking to a mortgage friend of mine the other day, and he said, Jim, we ask for everything but a blood test right now. He says you have to have at least a 720 FICO score. You have to have full documentation. We have to look at the deal and make sure that, it's a good deal. In a lot of instances, they're requiring investors to bring 20% to the table. Okay, so unless you're going to use private money or hard money, a lot of times if you're not able to bring that kind of money cash to the table, you can't do a deal. So lease options is a great way to control property. Okay, so it's leveraged at its best. We just talked about that. You become recession-proof because you can use lease options in an up market, down market, or a sideways market. Again, you can take advantage of cycles and trends. I've been doing lease options for 20-plus years. You want to invest like an investor and finance like a tenant. And let me explain that for a minute. We want to invest like an investor, meaning that what we want to do is we want to get the most bang for our buck. We want to try to get a property far under fair market value as possible. You may say, yeah, that's common knowledge, Jim. You're not coming down from the mountain with tablets. This is common knowledge. Yes, but here the flip side of that is we want to finance like a tenant. It always struck me that I used to sign on the dotted line for hundreds of thousands of dollars for buildings and so forth, 3-deckers. And if you're not familiar with that term, here in the Northeast, it's just 3 apartments stacked on top of each other. 5 families, duplexes, and so forth. Investing type properties. And I used to sign on the dotted line for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And my tenants would just go ahead and put a first and a last month's rent down, maybe a security deposit, and they have full control of my property. And I just never understood that concept. They take a little bit out, I take a lot out, or at least I'm on the hook for a lot, and they have control of my property. And here in the Northeast, trying to evict somebody is like an act of Congress. That's one of the reasons why I actually got out of the investing or the landlord side of the house and so forth. And I did my investigatory work. I did my due diligence on reviewing their applications and so forth. But I found out real fast that people have 2 and 3 different names and social security numbers and so forth. So, again, I got very disillusioned. But, you want to take that to heart. You want to invest like an investor and finance like a tenant. And it's time to start living your dream. So many investors are on the sidelines right now because, especially the people that like wholesaling, because they're like, there's no deals out there. everybody's upside down. What the heck am I supposed to do? Well, again, I'm the kind of person that if something's placed in front of me, I'm going to find a way around that, or I'm going to find a strategy or a technique to overcome that. And, don't sit on the sidelines. Don't throw your hands up in the air and say, well, can't invest in this real estate market. We're going to have to wait till it comes back. No, unless you want to live the way you're living now, you've got to take action. And again, this is not some, infomercial that you're hearing on television. I'm not going to say, in 2 weeks after investing in lease options, you're going to be on that sandy beach drinking a, little drink with those umbrellas in them and so forth, and you're going to be on a beautiful yacht. No, it takes time to build wealth, but, again, if you don't start today, when are you going to start? Okay, what type of investor are you? This is important before we actually get into the meat of lease options. What kind of investor are you? Have you ever thought of that? Are you an aggressive investor, a moderate investor, a conservative investor? What do I consider? Well, I consider aggressive investors those people that do, pre-construction, condo conversions. They're into these big, heavy-duty rehabs. My take on that is unless you have a construction background, you don't want anything to do with rehabs. I know that there are a couple of gentlemen that are going across the country right now. They got their 15 minutes of fame, on a local television show, and they're doing boot camps now showing how easy it is. But, again, I've done some rehabs in the past, way back when you could do it under what's called the HUD 203K program. And I'll tell you, it was a nightmare. And unless you're a super aggressive investor, I tell people you may want to stay away from that. Okay, now the moderate, I consider those people who are moderate investors those that are investing as landlords. You're willing to go ahead and put it out there a little bit, but, again, you're not very aggressive like the flippers are and so forth. So I consider that moderate mentality. Conservative, I consider lease options very conservative. I don't really have any risk out there whatsoever. I like that. I like an idea where I can go ahead and mitigate my loss as much as possible, but at the same time making maximum profit. So that's what I consider conservative. So you have to ask before you even consider doing lease options, short sales, whatever the case may be, you have to put yourself in those categories. Short sales, probate, the same way. I consider this conservative types of investing. So you have to know right out of the gate. You don't want to think midstream, okay, now am I aggressive or am I moderate or conservative? You don't want to be laying in bed at night staring at the ceiling wondering, hey, am I going to be able to sleep tonight, or am I worrying about if they're kicking holes in my walls at my properties, or if I'm going to be able to go ahead and sell this property, whatever the case may be. But you may say, Jim, I already know how to do lease options. Well, if you do something wrong long enough, you do it perfectly wrong. I say that all the time because there's so many people that call my office on a daily basis. They try to tell me, oh, yeah, I do lease options and I'm doing this and everything. And they've done some kind of hybrid debacle that I can't even recognize what the heck it is. But they read a book or they listen to a CD and they try to fumble it through themselves. And now they're on the short end of the stick. 9 times out of 10, they're getting themselves in some potential litigation problems. Because they didn't cross their T's and they didn't dot their I's. And even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while. These are the people that you hear at the real estate investment clubs. Hey, I did such and such, and I sit there and I shake my head because I usually go on after them to give my presentation. And I'm shaking my head like I can't believe this person did that. But now they're making this is gospel now. Hey, I can do this every day because I got lucky. But again, even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while. Okay, here we go. Lease options, a.k.a. rent to own. What is a lease option? Well, the definition of it, it's the right but not the obligation to purchase a property, product, or service at a predetermined price and term sometime in the future. That's it. That's the dictionary definition of it. But what the power of the lease option is when you combine the power of a lease and an option, that's where the real power is. When you get those two separate contracts and you put them together and you merge them together, that's the power of lease options. So what are some of the benefits of lease options? Well, it's the ultimate escape clause. One of the things that they teach you in law school when you go to contractual law is that any good contractual agreement will have an escape clause that if for whatever reason you're not able to live up to the terms of the contract or or the services of the contract, there's a way for you to duck out let me just grab a drink here while I'm talking. There's a clause for you to escape without suffering any kind of damage, whether it be financial or a non-performing clause that somebody could come after you for. So you always want to have a escape clause. So lease options are the ultimate because, remember, you have the right but not the obligation. So you don't have to pull the trigger and actually go through and buy the property if the deal goes sour on you. You know, maybe you bought it, or maybe you went into a lease option thinking, hey, I'm going to go ahead and exercise my option in 2 or 3 years. The market goes down. You know, you're underwater now as far as your offer and so forth. Well, you don't have to exercise it. You can just walk away. Little or no money needed. You can, as we go on today, you're going to be able to see an example in a little while of how I actually took no money out of my pocket, which is nice, especially, you know, again, this is the mentality of financing like a tenant. We want to take as little money as possible out of our pocket. We have all the benefits of control without ownership. This is one of the big benefits of lease options. Your name appears nowhere on the deed. You know, let's say, for instance, the code department came knocking one day and, you know, they found a violation and everything. Well, it's not going to go to Jim Gage Investor. It's going to go whoever the owner of record is on that title. So you don't have to worry about it, but you have all the benefits of controlling that property. So that's another nice option, or benefit, I should say. It can be used in an up, down, or sideways market. And people are always amazed at this because they think it's a down market strategy, but by no means is it just a down market strategy. It's a sideways and up market strategy too. I've been doing them for 20 years. Granted, when you're in a bull market, so to speak, and everything is, you know, selling like gangbusters, is it a little bit more difficult? Yeah, but it's not impossible. You make money at the front, the middle, and at the end of the deal. I always like to structure my deals where I make money in all those three positions. I don't like the idea of having to wait after I buy a property or do a strategy and have to wait down the road for a payday. I want to make money now because I don't know about you, but I got fishing to do, so I need money to go ahead and buy not only fuel for the boat, but, you know, bait and so forth. So I structure my stuff so I make money in the front of the deal, the middle of the deal, and at the end of the deal, and we'll show you how to do that in a little bit. You know, it's not going to be any more waiting for your payday at the end of the rainbow, so to speak. You're going to be making money all throughout the deal. Okay, we already said this, but I can't state this enough. I want you to get this burned into your mind that, hey, when this market does turn around, that's not going to be the end of using lease options. Even when it's progressing up again or even leveling out, again, you're going to be able to do lease options. Pre-foreclosures, you can use lease options and pre-foreclosures, especially when everything is upside down. I don't know if you've been experiencing this, but people always complain to me, everything is upside down. How can I make any money in this deal unless I do a short sale? And then how much under fair market value am I going to be able to get this so I can weather out the storm? Well, here you can use it in pre-foreclosures. And I'll give you a quick scenario later on in how you use it in pre-foreclosures. Because remember, you can go ahead and take lease options and put them on the market and market them 10 to 15% above fair market value. Why is that? Because you're giving people terms. Okay, so you're going to have a distinct advantage over your competition. So where they come and say there's no deal to be had here, you're going to be able to come in with lease options and be able to put it under a magnifying glass and crunch the numbers and obviously go over the logistics of the deal and everything and do a lease option deal with it because, again, you have that padding of 10 to 15% above fair market value because, again, you're giving people terms. Okay, we just talked about upside-down properties. You can use them with single-family homes, multi-family homes, condos, land. I even use them on mobile homes, okay? And it's a very powerful strategy for anything. You can use a lease option on anything. I think the biggest thing that we're probably familiar with is on equipment. Usually people in business or on farms and so forth, they use leases and or options on farm equipment and business equipment. Okay, there are 5 types of lease options. The first one is the most common that most people will know is what's called a sandwich lease. And all a sandwich lease is that you have a contract with the seller of the property, and then you turn around and you find what we call the tenant buyer, and you put somebody at a higher selling price and higher terms as far as, rent and so forth, and you put them in the property. Some people like to call this subletting, okay, but it's known as a sandwich technique when we're talking to lease options, and that's pretty much the most popular and widely known type of lease option. But it doesn't stop there. The next one is an assignment. What if you're just starting out with lease options, okay, and you don't have a database of people set up where you don't want to go ahead and take a property under your belt, so to speak, and pay monthly payments to the seller when you don't have anybody to sandwich in the property? Well, you can go ahead and do what's called the assignment. All you're doing is you go out, you find the deal, you negotiate it, you maybe get a pure option on the property. We'll talk about what a pure option is in a minute. And then you assign your position over to that person, whether they're a fellow investor, and you bring the deal to a real estate investment club and shop the deal at your meeting, or you find somebody that's looking for a primary residence. They're sick of renting and they just want. What you do is you collect. Usually, I collect between $5,000 and $7,000 because I went and negotiated a deal. I sign my position over to mean the terms of the contract that I had with the seller. I staple this on back of the pure option, and I hand it over to the tenant buyer, who's now going to be in that property, and they're going to take over all the terms that I've already negotiated, and I'm off to the next deal. So starting out where you don't really have a database full of people, this is probably the easiest way to use lease options and be profitable. Next thing is what I call the cooperative. Okay, now you may run into people and you may have to do a little educating as far as telling them how lease options work and what lease options are. And at the end of the conversation, they'll probably say to you, well, I like the concept and everything, but why do I need you now? I can do this myself. And then you need to retort back to them, well, yeah, you probably could do this yourself, sir or ma'am, but what if I said that I would go ahead and work with you? I would show you how to market this property. I would show you how to tie it up in legally binding paperwork. I would show you how to go ahead and to do some investigation on the prospective tenant buyer. We'd run any kind of credit reports or any kind of background searches that you want to, and we'll make sure that we get a good quality person in this property for you. And then again, the main thing is we'll tie it up in legally binding paperwork, not only to protect you, but to also protect their interests. And then what we can either do is split the non-refundable option consideration that you get up front, or what we can do is split maybe some of the profits in the back. I usually take with that thing that's called non-refundable option consideration, and we probably should talk about that briefly right now. Anytime you're going to put a prospective tenant buyer in the genre of the sandwich lease, you're going to require 2 to 5% of the agreed-upon selling price in what's called non-refundable option consideration. This is money that's held outside of escrow. You don't have to put it in escrow. It goes in what? It goes in the HIP National Bank, which is your pocket. Okay? And again, what happens if they don't exercise their option? Well, guess what? It's non-refundable. You get to keep it. And then at the end of the year, you just claim it as ordinary income on your taxes, on your 1040. You can talk more to your tax advisor professional about that, but it's ordinary income. Okay, it's non-refundable. So a lot of times when I'm doing a cooperative, I'll just say, well, why don't we go ahead and split the option consideration? And 9 times out of 10, people will actually agree to doing that because, again, they like the concept. They think maybe they can do it themselves, but they like the safety net. So it's just like when somebody tries to sell their house for sale by owner. You can put it on your calendar like clockwork. You see the sign go out there, for sale by owner, within 30 days you're going to see a realtor sign out there because they get very disillusioned with the process and so forth. So that's cooperative. And if you have any questions, we're going to take some questions. I believe Linda had said at the end, probably in another 20 minutes, we're going to start taking some questions. So hold on to those questions or actually email them in. The next is the hybrid, and I like to think that I kind of developed this concept. The hybrid is based on that everybody knows a realtor. If you really think about it, everybody knows a realtor. Either they have a family member, friend, or a friend of the friend, or whatever the case may be, who's a real estate professional. And I was finding that I was talking to a lot of people, and they like the idea of lease options, but they were either in the process or they were getting actually ready to sign a agreement with a realtor to put it on the market. So probably, I would say about 10 years ago, I ran into a gentleman, and he said, Jim, I'd love to do a lease option with you, and I only got one problem. My wife's sister's coming over tonight. She's a realtor, and she's going to list the property. And I said, well, what time is she coming over? And he said, 6 o'clock. I said, do you mind if I come over and make a little mini presentation to your wife, and maybe, maybe I have an option for you, excuse the pun, to get this moving quickly for you, because he was getting ready to retire to, I think, Arizona, and wanted to get rid of the house quite quickly. So I showed up at 6 o'clock, and again, I didn't have a warm welcome from the realtor. She kind of gave me the death stare the whole time. But I just explained my position. I says, well, wouldn't this make sense, Mr. and Mrs. Seller? What if you had two people working for you instead of one? Why don't you go ahead and list this property with your sister-in-law tonight, but include into the contract here that I have first right of refusal, that if I bring somebody to you and you like the terms of the lease option, that you'll do business with me and she'll get X'd out of the equation. And then if she brings you somebody that makes an offer that you feel comfortable with, then I get X'd out of the equation. And everybody, I think, was on board except for the realtor, but then they convinced her to do it. And so we did it. Well, the realtor didn't know that I had a quite extensive database full of people that I already had pre-qualified and were actually looking for that part of town. So within 2 days, I had somebody at their door, and make a long story short, I got the deal, she didn't, and that was because I used the strategy. Most people, when they would hear that a realtor was coming on the scene, they would have said, okay, well, thank you for your time, got in their car and left. I like to take the mentality of the deal's not over until I say it's over. So I look at a pie and I say to myself, do I want a piece of the pie or do I want the whole pie? So I continually, I'm always changing my strategies, tweaking my strategies and my techniques, and seeing what works and what doesn't work. And that's what you have to do in this business, whether it be lease options or anything else. So that's the hybrid technique. And now the next one is the pure option. Now you can use a pure option with lease options, but you can use a pure option on anything. Say, you're a good negotiator and you're able to negotiate a property way under fair market value, and you think, well, there's enough of money in the spread where I can go out and find somebody who's willing to go ahead and pull the trigger and buy the property right now. Well, what you would do is you would just sign what's called a pure option with the seller. It gives you 30, 60, 90, 120 days of an option on the property at the terms that you've already negotiated with the seller. And then you just put a clause in there that you have first right of refusal, that they don't have to take it off the market, they don't have to stop marketing. However, if somebody comes to them and they want to do business with that individual, they have to come back to Jim Gage and give me the first bite at the apple, because, again, I get that first right of refusal. So that way, again, if you don't have anybody in your database and you want to shop the deal, this allows you to tie up the property with the terms that you've already negotiated, and gives you time to go ahead and, again, shop the deal and hopefully be able to make some money for yourself. So that's a pure option. Finding lease options. Well, how do you find lease options? Well, in the local newspaper. And you may be saying, Jim, I didn't pay whatever I paid for this webinar to go ahead and hear you talk about looking in my local newspaper. I didn't have to come on to hear that. But you probably never heard this approach this way. Yeah, I look for the for sale by owners. I look for the houses that are listed with the realtors, but I also look in the for rent section of the newspaper. And you may be saying, Jim, isn't that a waste of time? They're not looking to sell. They're looking to rent. But I would say probably 40% of the time when I call these for rents and everything, and I get into dialogue with these people, that, yeah, they're not interested in maybe selling now, but in 3 to 5 years they may be willing to, because I found a trend that most people that have investment property, a lot of people are just holding on to these properties until they retire. So I'm running into a lot of people, about 30 or 40% of the time, that, yeah, they'd be interested in maybe 3 or 5 years, and they don't want to have to turn over the property on a yearly basis and go in there and paint and all this, so they'd rather go ahead and do a lease option with me. So I encourage you to look in the rental section of the newspaper. On the web, okay, I thought the web was going to be a fad, to tell you the truth. Boy, was I wrong. But there are, look on the web. isoldmyhouse.com, all these other places. Obviously, you got a good resource with foreclosure.com. I mean, that's what I use to get my leads for pre-foreclosures. I mean, what a great resource. You get all that information, and again, it's probably the freshest information that I've come across, because there's a lot of people out there selling quote-unquote listings and everything, and they're just recycled stuff from 6 months ago, and they throw it out there, and people pay a subscription to it. The people here at foreclosure.com, they have the freshest stuff that I've seen, and believe me, I've seen a lot of stuff. So don't negate that at all. Again, we just said foreclosure lists. Bird dogs. Okay, bird dogs are a great resource. I'll give you a quick tip here. One of the best bird dogs that you can use are postmen and postwomen. Why is that? Because they know everything that's going on in the neighborhood. They know who the desperate housewives are. They know who's in bankruptcy. They know they know everything. They know more than the priests, the rabbis, the reverends. They know everything that's going on. So I use post people in all over the places that I invest. And I don't know if we have any time to talk about it today. If we do at the end, I'll tell you a little quick marketing technique to the bird dogs. The other thing is hook up with a mortgage person, because they turn down a lot of people for mortgages because the underwriting guides are so stringent right now. So if you can go to them and say, hey, you ever have to turn anybody down for a loan? And, of course, they're going to say, yeah. Say, well, I do rent-to-own lease options. Well, why don't you send them over to me, or here's some of my business cards, have them get in contact with me. I'll put them in a lease option for a year, and then we'll allow you to work with them. And, if they have a little bump in their credit or whatever the case may be, you can work with them, and then a year from now we'll come back and you can write the loan. Believe me, mortgage professionals and bankers and so forth will trip over themselves because it's such a cutthroat industry that, I was talking to a mortgage person not too long ago, and they were saying that, unfortunately, what happens is when somebody refis their house or gets a primary loan, this was big when you had those interest-only loans. They'd say, hey, keep them for a year and then come back in a year and we'll refinance you after you pump up your credit a little bit. But they were saying people were getting bombarded with so many advertisements in the mail that they never got anybody back. So they'll be tripping over you to stay with you. Absolutely. The other thing is advertisements, advertising, bandit signs. I buy houses cash. Well, again, I can't stand those signs because, again, this is the kind of time you don't want to look like the rest of the daisies in the field. You want to change the verbiage. So I tell people, rather than look like everybody else, quick story here. I was driving down to Rhode Island to speak at an investment club, and from my house to Rhode Island it was maybe about 50 minutes. And I counted on the telephone poles as I was going down there about 65 I buy houses cash signs, all with different telephone numbers. So this is, again, where you don't want to look like the rest of the daisies in the field. So I suggest if you're going to use bandit signs, why not put something to the effect of, need to sell your house? I have options. Call Jim and put your phone number. Go just change your methods a little bit. Change the verbiage. The other thing is Craigslist. It's a free resource online. Free is good. Go ahead and put some advertisements out on Craigslist. Flyers. Don't underestimate flyers. I like to put flyers in hospitals on bulletin boards down there in the cafeteria. Great resource. Obviously, we don't have enough time to talk about marketing and advertising today, but, again, those are gold mines in my estimation. Also, send them to the human resource departments of corporations. They always have departments that will help with people relocating and need housing and so forth. So those are great areas, not only to market for lease options, but market too, because what happens if somebody needs to get rid of their house and they're getting relocated to another state? Well, there you go. You can offer them a lease option. That way they don't have a bridge loan, or at least if they do have a bridge loan, they have the money to go ahead and pay for one side of it. MLS. Remember we had talked about expired listings? Again, gold mine. Okay, qualifying. All right, tenant buyers. Okay, we want to qualify our tenant buyers. So I tell people, like, within 5 to 7 minutes on the telephone, when people call from an ad of yours or whatever, you should be able to qualify them and find out if you're going to be able to do business with them, okay? The most important thing, if you were to have a checklist in front of you, is you want to find out why they're looking for a lease option, where they're presently living now, and why they want to leave there. Find out if they're in a lease or a month-to-month, because you don't want to take a landlord's tenant who's been paying faithfully, because you'll probably get a knock at your front door. The other thing is, how soon do they want to move? Is this something they want to do now, or is this something they're going to do in 6 months and so forth? The other thing, obviously, you want to find out if they have the money. Again, this is a big thing. You don't want them to say, well, I have first and last month's rent, because, again, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for at least 2 to 5% of the negotiated selling price. Okay, so on the confines of about 5 to 7 minutes, in general terms, you'll be able to qualify them and find out, okay, these things. Here's Jim's checklist here. and it's a little bit more complicated than that, but unfortunately we're not going to have time. We're not going to be able to get through this but if you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me, and I'll try to expound upon that for you. Sellers, okay, you want to qualify the sellers too. I always say when you're dealing with people, you want to use a pain scale. Now, this is where my medical background comes in. One of the things that you do when somebody's having chest pain is you have them rate that pain on a scale from 1 to 10. What's that pain? 1 being the least and 10 being the most excruciating pain you have. What would you describe that pain in your chest? Well, you want to go ahead and you want to rate not only your tenant buyers but also your sellers on how motivated they are to do a lease option with you. Okay, I usually say unless somebody has a 5 or greater, I'm not going to waste my time with them. You know, because a lot of times sellers will say, yeah, I'm interested in everything, and you go look at the property, you fall in love with it, you know, it meets your investing criteria and so forth, and you crunch the numbers, and you're going to be able to make a boatload of cash, and then they say, well, I got to think about it. I got to talk to my priest, my rabbi, my confessor, my mailman, whoever the case may be. Why don't you call me back in a few days, and I'll tell you whether or not I'm interested. Well, what does that really mean? That really means no. Okay, so we don't want to waste time. There's an abundance of inventory out there, so it's very important that we qualify not only our sellers but our tenant buyers. You must have a database, okay? Within my program that you'll see at the end of this webinar, I have a software program that I use that's very user-friendly. You know, thank God for point and click. I'm not computer savvy. But a database is very, very important in my estimation. That's where we put our tenant buyers and our sellers that we qualify in our database, especially our tenant buyers. Then we can go out and look for specific properties if we don't have anything in our inventory. Okay, we've already qualified them. We know that they're ready to go. We know they have a chunk of money. So we're off to the races. We just find the property and match it up to them, do the lease option, and we're off to the next one. So a database is very important. Even if you don't have it, you're just starting from scratch. You want to start today to start putting people in your database. So how do you use lease options with foreclosures? That's a good question. Let me give you a sample deal that I did not too long ago. All right, it was a 4-bedroom, 3.5 bath, 2-car garage, 3,300 square feet. And by the way, this was from a lead that I got from foreclosure.com. Okay, so again, you can make money using that list as long as you know how to use it properly, especially with lease options. Okay, the appraised value was $405. And again, when you have appraised value and they come up with that and you ask the seller, well, how'd you arrive at your price? Well, appraised value. Okay, that's great if they had an appraisal. But a lot of people, they'll just pull a number out of the air. So you have to probe that a little bit. Now, did you have a realtor come over, give you a broker's opinion? And, is this the assessed number for taxes? Did you have an appraisal? 9 times out of 10, they'll say, well, broke Uncle Bob in Missouri, that's what he sold his house for, and I have a similar house and so forth. So you really need to find out what the appraised value is. But in this particular house, there was an appraisal done. It was $405,000. Just to give you a little bit of background, what happened is the husband had a job relocation to New York. The family stayed behind here. He went out, started his new job. He found a house which was the family's dream house. He didn't think he was going to have a problem, him and his wife selling this house. They pulled the trigger. They ended up with a bridge loan, and they didn't have enough income coming in to keep everything afloat, so they decided to let the house here in Massachusetts default. Okay, so that's how I got the lead. The PITI, which is principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, was $2,700 a month. Okay, well, I entered into the situation here. I went ahead and got a 3-year lease option with these people. Now, when we go in, we want to use that investor and finance like a tenant mentality, and you'll see how this comes, or I should say awakes in this sample here. But what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to get the longest period of time on a lease option that we can. Okay, we want to try to get 5 years if we can. The norm is usually 2. 3 was an excellent deal here. 5 is usually out of the realm. A lot of people are not willing to go out 5 years. And then if we do a sandwich with people, we give them a year at a time, and I'll show you in a minute why that is. Okay, so I got 3 years, $398,000. The rent was $2,700, and I got a $300 per month rent credit because I said, well, I don't want to just have my money disappear and not see any of my money work for me. So, is there any way you can give me maybe like some rent credit, That's exactly what I said to her and the way I said it to her. And she goes, well, yeah, I guess we could give you like $300 or whatever. Would you accept that? And I'm like, well, yeah, I guess so. So, yeah, of course I took that. All right? Okay, so what I ended up doing is I ended up going ahead and sandwiching this property. I had a tenant buyer already in my database. There were two professionals. They were both physicians at UMass Medical Center in Worcester, Massachusetts. And basically, they were done with their residency, and they were going to be staying here in the UMass area, and they wanted, actually, in a year. And they weren't making real good money now, but they knew after they finished their residency that they weren't going to have a problem. So they were able, rather than staying in a studio apartment or something, they were able to get the house that they wanted now. And I put them in a sandwich lease. I gave them a selling price of $425,000, a rent of $3,000 a month, and $150 per month rent credit. Because remember, it works both sides. They don't want to see their money burning either. And again, when we negotiated $150 per month, they felt, well, at least something's going towards the selling price. I gave them a 1-year lease option. Remember, I had 3 on it. Why would I give them a year? Well, because it's a high percentage of lease options that are not exercised in the first year. So let's say after the year that they came back to me and said, Jim, things are not working out the way we thought they were going to work out, so we're not going to be able to exercise their our lease option. So what was going to happen here? Well, they would have had to walk away from their non-refundable option consideration, right? But they had, let's say they were good, tenant buyers and so forth, didn't cause any problem, paid meticulously on the first of every month. Well, I could come in like the knight in shining armor and offer them a second year. Say, well, you know what, you've been good. Why don't I go ahead and give you another year on it? Okay, then I could actually do a couple of things. I could charge more rent. I could get more option consideration, because if I give somebody a second bite at the apple, I'm going to want at least 50% of what they originally gave me. And I could also say, well, the price of the home has gone up in the last 12 months, and I could actually raise the asking price if I so chose. Okay? They took care of the first $250 of maintenance per occurrence. Okay, so I didn't have to worry about getting called at, at midnight, that the toilet was stopped up or the fuse blew or whatever the case may be. Okay, so they took care of the first $250 of maintenance per occurrence. Now, if anything major happened, like the roof started leaking or whatever, in the confines of the contractual contract, that's not my responsibility, that's the owner's responsibility. Okay, so the owner's on the hook for any major things, like the furnace going or the roof going or foundation problem, whatever the case may be. So this is just for the minor things that you don't want to play landlord to. So they sign on the dotted line that they'll take care of the first $250 per occurrence. They gave me a $10,000 option consideration, which was non-refundable up front. All right, that's a little bit lower than what we were talking about in the window of that 2 to 5%. It's on the low end. However, they had a tough situation. They were residents. They really didn't have the cash. I could have went ahead and created a note and said, well, I'll take the $10,000 and I'll create a note for another $10,000 or whatever. I could have done that, but these people were good people. They were solid professionals, and again, I'm not going to get greedy. Okay, so let's crunch the numbers and see how I made money on this deal. And by the way, they did exercise their option after a year. Okay, the contract price, $398,000. That's what I contracted it for. Okay, my option consideration that I gave the seller was only $2,700, which was the first and last month's rent. Okay, so again, financed like a tenant. So the total out of my pocket, so to speak, would be $400,700. Okay, my rent credit equaled $3,600, because remember what they gave me in rent credit every month? $300 times 12. Okay? Now remember, the tenant buyer gave me a $10,000 option consideration. How much is my cost basis? Well, $387 and $100. Okay, that's my cost basis. Okay, when and if the tenant buyer exercised their option, they did exercise their option. The sales price, $425,000. Remember, that's what my negotiated price was with them. They gave me a $10,000 option consideration, which I'll have to take off the top at closing, because that's money that was held outside of escrow. And by the way, they could use that $10,000 from the receipt I wrote them to help them qualify for the loan. Okay, rent credit $1,800 over the course of a year, so that has to be backed out at closing too. Total purchase price $413,200. Okay. My cost basis $387,100. Okay. My profit $26,100 or $14,300. Why the two numbers? Well, if I didn't take the option consideration, I just want to show you this for illustration purposes. If I didn't take any option consideration, which I tell people you're a fool if you don't, I would have at closing received $26,100. Instead, I took the $10,000 option consideration, and the rent credits are all figured in there, so it's $14,300 at closing. Okay, so zero out of my pocket. Remember, I had to put $2,700 up, but guess what? I got $10,000 in a matter of a couple of days back. So truly, it's zero money out of my pocket. I put a little bit in, but I got that back out. So as you can see, this is an awesome way to control real estate and to work real estate. Now the paperwork, we're going to briefly go over that, and then we're going to go into questions. But contracts, okay? How many? How many contracts should you use? Well, when you're doing a lease option with a seller of a property, you want to do one set of paperwork. When you turn around and do a lease option with a tenant buyer, you want to do two separate contracts. You want to do a lease, a residential lease, and you want to do an option. The reason for that is simple. If, God forbid, you ever had to take them into court to evict them because they weren't paying, and remember, money is a motivating factor. When somebody has 2 to 5% of non-refundable option consideration up front, they're going to go ahead and behave themselves. So don't worry about that. You're not going to get your quote-unquote traditional tenant. But if you were to bring them into a housing court or whatever venue of court that you have, and you went before a judge and said, I have a lease option with these people, they haven't been paying, I want to evict them, the housing court judge would not be able to hear that case because it's a contractual matter, and they would have to kick it to Superior Court. However, if you say, yes, Your Honor, they do have a lease with me, an option on the property with me, but I'm not here to enforce that. I'm here to enforce them defaulting on their lease. Then the judge would be able to hear the case and go forward with, hopefully, an eviction process. Okay, so remember, with a seller, we're going to use one when we're in the driver's seat. When we turn around and go to tenant buyer, we're going to use two contracts. The other thing that you want to do is what's called a memorandum of option. Okay, this clouds the title. Once you do a lease option with the seller, you don't want them to go ahead and sell the property from underneath you. So you file what's called a memorandum of option. It's a single document that's filed at your courthouse, and it clouds the title. So when they do a title search, it comes up clouded, and it can't be sold until the title is what's called perfected. Okay, so that's a memorandum of option. Disclosure. Now, this is what I'm going to give to everybody for free. This is what I use. It's a three-page document that I use. I call it the must-sign document. If you go ahead and email me and say, Jim, I was on the webinar, will you please send me the must-sign document? I'll send it to you. My email address is coach@jgage.com. Again, it's coach@G-A-G-E.com. And just ask for the must-sign document. And it's a disclosure. It just basically says that you negotiated in good faith, they're happy with the sales amount, that you've advised them to have their paperwork reviewed by an attorney and or accountant, with the caveat that if they're going to present it to your attorney, that you can be present so you can explain the deal to the attorney, because attorneys are notorious as deal breakers. Okay, so you want to make sure you're there. Another clause I had to put in there, and I'm not trying to be racist or anything, but it says that they understand and read English, because you don't want somebody to come back and say, I didn't understand the contract because that's not my native language. Okay, so it just covers all the bases for you, because people lie, but documents don't lie. So the more you cross your T's and you dot your I's, if they were ever trying to come back at you, especially, now in foreclosures, they couldn't come back and say, well, I thought I was going to get my house back. They didn't explain it to me that way. Well, you get that disclosure that says they were fully aware that they weren't going to get the house back and blah, blah, blah. So again, that's a free document that I'm willing to go ahead and give to you that I use in my own real estate investing. Again, just go to coach@jgage.com and ask for the must-sign document. Okay, conclusion. That must-sign document, you need to do that whether you're going to do lease options or anything else. Whether you're doing lease options, short sales, probates, flips, whatever the case may be, please protect yourself. I know it's hard to believe that we live in a litigious society, but we do. And the more documentation that you have, the better off you are. Reminds me of one of the first times I was before a judge, and again, I wasn't in trouble. I was just there representing a client. And the judge looked down at the opposing counsel and said to him, ignorance is not an excuse. there was a contractual agreement, and his client's position was, well, I didn't know what I was signing. Well, the judge said, well, you signed it, and ignorance is not an excuse. Did they advise you to have this reviewed by an attorney and or accountant? Yes, they did. Well, guess what? Have a nice day. You lose. So with that, just keep that in mind. Okay, now let's talk about the offer that we have here. The people at foreclosure.com asked me to put something together, and I was more than happy to. As you can see from the webinar today, I try to give as much information as I can. I don't like to give generic information, and none of my products and or services have any generic information in them whatsoever. That's why I always try to include some form of mentoring with anything I do, whether it's a CD or a manual or whatever the case may be. But this is the Lease Purchase Success System, and it's a very comprehensive package. I think I thought of everything. I guess this is the time I pat myself on the back, but I did from a perspective of if I was a novice investor or even an intermediate or seasoned investor, I think everybody can take something away from this course. What do you actually receive? Well, you really receive 7 CDs that are 8+ hours of information. Okay, it's jam-packed. We go over role-playing, we go over, scripts, we go over marketing, we go over some negotiating. Actually, part of this course has its own negotiating segment. It has the forms and CDs, all the contractual agreements that I use that are legal in all the 50 states, with the exception of Louisiana, which my contracts, if you are in Louisiana, just let me know and I'll modify the contracts for Louisiana, because all 49 states, with the exception of Louisiana, are based on what's called English common law. Everything in Louisiana, it's French law, so it's a little bit different. But these are not generic contracts. These are exactly what I use in my business. Database software, I've included exactly the database that I use. You'll find it very user-friendly. Negotiating for Profit, it's a manual that I put together about negotiating. Has a nice 2 CD companion set with it. Also, how to build a real estate power team, who you need to have on your team, because you can actually make yourself crazy by trying to find all these professionals to get on your team. So we talk about why you should have certain professionals on them, how to locate them in record time. That way you don't have to spend 3 weeks interviewing attorneys and so forth. And then the most important thing I think of all of this is, I don't know if you're like me, but if anytime I listen to a CD or read a book or a manual, I always have questions on how does this pertain to my situation. So I always include one-on-one mentoring session with me. You write down your questions. We get on the phone, lasts for about an hour, and we go over your particular situation or maybe a deal that you're working on, and hopefully we'll crunch the numbers and see if it's a profitable deal for you. That being said, the retail is $695. The event price here is $395. I just want to say one quick thing. Summertime, in the summer months are where I get some of my best deals as far as lease options go. The reason for that, I think, is because a lot of my competition is, thinking about summer vacations or going to weddings or graduations. A lot of people that are investors actually put their investing on the back burner when the summer months come. And I'm not saying you have to go out there and do real estate investing 80 hours a day, or 80 hours a week, but at the same time, you should be active in the summertime because, again, a lot of your competition is going to be doing those activities that we just talked about. So you might want to think about actually putting it into turbocharge mode right now. So if you want to purchase this, I believe there's a link here. It's http://products.foreclosure.com, and I believe that'll be on the main page, Linda has told me. If not, just click on Real Estate Courses or Courses on the left-hand side panel, and you should be able to see it at Lease Options Success System. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Linda, and she's going to bring in some questions, and that's how we'll finish up.
Okay, great. Jim, man, you give us a lot of great information and a lot to think about. Loved your sample. Great sample. So I appreciate that. Okay, we have had some questions come in, and we'd encourage you as well that we're going to have a few minutes here left to please submit those should you have any additional thoughts or questions that have kind of come to your mind as we've been going through this program today. Okay, first couple questions are, first one is, what would be the benefits to the buyer/renter?
Okay, so the tenant buyer, what are the advantages of them getting into a lease option?
Right.
Well, first of all, they get to move into a property right now rather than waiting, until they have the money or the resources to buy the property. So they get the American dream, so to speak. They get to go in, have quote-unquote a house of their own. They're able to go ahead and do, obviously, some minor decorating. They get the yard where the dog can run around and the kids. But the biggest thing, I think, for them is that they're able to check out the neighborhood. I mean, how many times have we bought properties for our own residence, and you move into a neighborhood, and you're like, oh, this is a great neighborhood. This looks like June and Ward Cleaver live here. This is going to be, this is the end-all, the be-all. And then, you find out that you're living next door to the tenant or the neighbors from hell. Excuse my French, but, they're blaring Ozzy Osbourne at 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, what do? You call the realtor the next day, and you put the sign out there, and hopefully you're going to sell the property. Well, if you're in a lease option, one of the benefits, again, one of the greatest ones, I mean, there are other ones, but one of the greatest ones is that if you don't like the neighborhood, you don't like the school system, you don't like anything, you just don't like the area, well, you don't exercise your option, and you have no muss, no fuss, you're able to go out onto something else.
Okay, great.
And that's a good selling point, or actually a negotiating point if you're looking for a tenant buyer, too. You say, hey, you check out the area. If you don't like it, you're not locked into anything.
Right. Daisy asks, with a pre-foreclosure, do we have to advise the bank that this is an option the owner is taking to avoid foreclosure?
Okay. No, actually you don't, because all you're going to do is, with the non-refundable option consideration, you're going to cure the arrearages. So the bank's never going to be privy to you being involved in the equation, because remember, a due-on-sale clause can't be triggered because you don't own the property. It's not like you did a subject to, or you put it in a land trust or a realty trust or something, and, actually ownership is changing hands or whatever. So you don't have to advise the bank, And again, a lot of times if you're going to do a lease option with a bank, with a pre-foreclosure, what you're going to end up doing anyways is you're going to be making the payments to the bank anyways. You're going to ask the people that are living in the dwelling, you're never going to let the people stay in and do a lease option with you. That's the only time you're really going to get in trouble with some of these attorney generals in these various states, is if you go ahead and bail somebody out of foreclosure and then you put them in a lease option. That's, they look that's when the eyebrows start going up, like this is some kind of bailout scheme. But my philosophy is if they can't make their mortgage payment, how are they going to make their payment to you each month? So I make it a condition of doing a lease option with a pre-foreclosure. They have to leave the dwelling. We take the deed and we put it in escrow with either their attorney or our attorney. That way, if they decide to blow town and you can never find them again, when you get ready to exercise your option, you get that deed in escrow, and then you make the payments directly to the bank. And the bank's not going to care whose name is on the check as long as they're getting paid.
Okay, so then you're acting as the bank in this case, right? Like in the sample that you gave?
Well, you're not acting as the bank, but you're on the hook. I hate to use this term, but you're on the hook, or you're in the position to make the payment for the owner of the property to the
bank. Right. Okay. All right. And then the kind of a follow-up to that question was, so you're not negotiating anything with the bank in this case either? Because
no, you don't have to. You don't have to make any disclosure to the bank. The only way that you would have to make disclosure to the bank is obviously if you were doing a short sale. If you do a lease option, you don't have to, because again, you're just curing the arrearages. Once those arrearages are cured, whether it's with that option consideration or you go in and do what's called forbearance and work out something with the bank as far as taking those arrearages and throwing it in the back of the loan, or working out some installment agreement in addition to the payment each month, I mean, no, you don't have to make any kind of disclosure whatsoever.
Okay. What's maybe a tip or two that you would give our folks today in structuring a deal when we're seeing so many property values depreciating?
Okay, how do you protect yourself? Mm-hmm. In other words, well, again, I mean, I actually had that. I had that situation come up this week when I was dealing with an individual. The owner of the property said, well, I don't want to lock into a price with you right now because I think the market's going to go up, and I don't want to give away my upside potential. So on that particular thing, what we did is I said to him, I says, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we go ahead and do a lease option? But if and when I decide to exercise my option, I get a bonded appraiser, you get a bonded appraiser, and we'll meet in the middle. Does that make sense? You know, I mean, he's taking more of the risk because I don't see the market going up in the next, couple of years.
Right.
If at anything, it'll just level off, and then it'll make a slow climb up after that. But I mean, you're not going to see levels appreciate back to where they were, in 2 years or so. But again, the beauty behind the lease option is, if the deal doesn't go your way, you don't exercise your option, and you either, number one, walk away, or you go back to the owner of the property and renegotiate and say, I know that we agreed on $150,000. Let's use that as an example. I know we agreed on $150,000, but here it is 2 years later. I want to exercise my option because I like the property. Or if you got a tenant buyer in there, what the heck do you do then? Well, you can go back and negotiate with them because they know, and 9 times out of 10 they'll renegotiate with you because they know if they don't, then they're going to have to put it on with a realtor. It's going to be more time. They're going to have to wait for a selling time, the whole 9 yards. So a lot of times, if you bring documentation, I tell people all the time that people lie, but documents don't lie. Go ahead and bring some comparables of the area and say, look, I'm not lying here. It's not worth $150,000. Here's some comparables within, a couple of miles of your property, and these are what properties are going for.
Right.
So you can either walk away in conclusion to your question, that particular question. You can either walk away or go back and renegotiate.
Okay. George asked a specific question here, so bear with me as I read through it. Okay.
Okay.
If I can get a property for, and it's very nicely written, by the way, George, thank you. If I can get a property for $90,000, that's in foreclosure, and I pay $20,000 to get that property, what should be my lease or purchase rental per month for 1 year, and how much should I get down and per month?
Okay. Down, I'm just taking little notes here so I don't have to keep asking you. What did you say, Linda? Okay, so if I got this right, let me just recap here. If you can get a property for $90,000 pre-foreclosure, I'm assuming it's either a straight sale or a short sale. He has to put down $20,000 to gain control of the property. And how much should he put down, and how much should he be charging per month?
Right. And I hope that's right, George. So.
Okay. If not, George, send me an email, and I'll re-crunch the numbers and re-give you some tips here. Well, first of all, if you're going to do a lease option with it, remember the down payment should be 2 to 5% of the agreed-upon selling price. So whatever you negotiate with that tenant buyer for a negotiating price, ultimately within 2 to 5% of that negotiated price is what you should be charging for a down payment. But, that doesn't mean that you have to take all cash like we had said earlier. You could take half cash and create a note and then sell the note on the open market, and then you're out of, you sell it on the open market, that's a good chunk of cash in your pocket, and you're out of the note. I've taken some wacky things. I remember one time I took $5,000 and they gave me a coin collection. And another time I took some nice fishing poles and fishing reels. They weren't Zebco, they were nice things. But you can go ahead and mix and match, but it's 2 to 5%. As far as per month and how much you should be charging for a sales price, you're going to have to do a little bit of investigatory work as far as comparables go. You have to know what your market rent is. But remember, I had said usually you can go 10 to 15% above fair market value for the selling price of the home. All right, and also 10 to 15% above fair market value for rent. Also, so it's applicable to rent too. So if you pull all your comparables and it says, well, wait a minute, this house is worth $140,000. Well, you could opt 10 or 15% on top of that and put it on the open market for a lease option, and vice versa. If you find that the $850 per month is what you could get in rental on that particular property, then what you do is you put 10 or 15% on top of that, and then you see if you have any takers, and you go from there. So hopefully, that'll answer your question on that. But yeah, I understand. You're going to have $20K out of your pocket. Well, the first thing I would try to do is recoup that. That way, it becomes a real no money down deal for you.
Great. Well, Jim, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your expertise. and taking our questions too. We really appreciate that. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I just want to remind folks of a couple different webinars that we have coming around the corner. Sharon Restrepo is going to be here with us in the next couple weeks talking about how to get the bank to say yes to your short sale package. And then Andy Hiller will be with us and talking about how to invest in a market that's a little bit cool right now. Okay, also wanted to remind everyone, too, if you are not aware, we'd like to have you go check out our foreclosure.com/bootcamp. We have a very exciting boot camp going on with the president and founder of foreclosure.com, Brad Geisen, who's bought and sold over 5,000 properties throughout his 20-plus years in this business. Been very successful. He's a multimillionaire at age 24. And he's going to share with you some of the things that he has done throughout his investing career and how he's become successful. So go check that page out for a little more information on that. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, for taking time out of your busy lives to spend this time with us to learn a little more about lease options. Jim, we really appreciate you and your sharing your expertise.
Thank you, Linda, for having me.
And we wish you all a great day, and thanks again for sharing this time with us, and take care.